Thank you so much for coming to the Bold New wonderful lineup of speakers for you today. I just wanted to let you know that we do have a hard stop at 12 o'clock because we have our keynote session starting at 12:15. So please do limit your questions to one question per person and make sure it's a question that can promote discussion so we can all enjoy. And the other thing I'd like to ask is that because the entrance to this room is in the front, that if you have to leave for any reason, you go up the stairs back there and come in the top in the back so that we don't disrupt the conversation. Thanks very much and enjoy.
Okay, so this is on. I can tell. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. Great turnout. Fascinating topic. My name is Melissa Berman. I'm an adjunct professor here at the business school. I teach a class on philanthropy, but my day job is as president of Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, a nonprofit consulting and management service that helps donors create thoughtful, effective philanthropy throughout the world. Let me tell you real quickly, because I know we have already lost a little bit of our time, how we'll use the time together here, and then we'll move on quickly to introductions. I'll ask the panelists some questions, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to you all for questions so that you'll get at least 20-30 minutes of your opportunity to have your questions answered. As you can see, there are 2 microphones up there in the aisle, and so that's the process that we'll use. We'll kind of take turns going this microphone, then that microphone. So that's how we'll run the time so that you all can be sure to get to the next session on time. You know, it's an odd moment for us to be here in this room talking about cutting-edge technology and how technology has changed the world in the sort of immediate aftermath of the tragic death of Steve Jobs, who played a remarkable role in creating a great many of the technologies that we're all here to talk about. Many people, you know, who are young adults now refer to themselves as the I generation, based on the iPhone, the iPod, and now the iPad, et cetera. And at least one organization here has I as part of its name. But it is clearly the topic of the moment for all of us, not only in the technology sector, but the nonprofit sector. One thing I can't help but observe, because I started off my life as a medievalist, is to say that philanthropists have used technology to help make change happen for many, many centuries. The first philanthropists who, you know, understood what the impact of a printing press could be, for example. The philanthropist who funded people who sat in cold rooms and wrote in manuscript form. That was the technology of the era, and that's always been part of how philanthropy makes change happen, is to use the technology of the time. We're all fortunate to be living in a time in which technology is creating the same intensity of change as in the as when the printing press was invented back in the 15th century. So with that, I want to turn it over to my panelists here to ask each of them to give you a quick introduction of themselves and their organization.
Good morning, and thanks, Melissa. My name is Doug Borchard, and I'm a managing partner and the chief operating officer of an organization called New Profit. We are a venture philanthropy firm based up in Cambridge, Mass. For those of you who aren't familiar with venture philanthropy, we do our approach to grant making in the nonprofit sector draws a lot of its principles from the private sector world of venture capital, most notably in the fact that we're very focused on finding great leadership and great entrepreneurs, because we believe that's the source of most great innovation. And we identify those folks, provide them with multi-year funding and support, with a focus on taking their ideas and innovations to scale. We do that in a pretty highly engaged way over the course of generally 4, 5, 6 years working with organizations. I've been with New Profit personally about 7 years, and during that time have had the opportunity to work with probably 10 of our grantees in a variety of sectors. We fund in education, workforce development, health, and anti-poverty. And increasingly, we're starting to see in all of those fields some really interesting and creative uses of technology. So excited to be on the panel this morning and be part of that conversation.
Hi, so great to see so many people turn out today. My name is Michael O'Brien. I'm the CEO of iMentor. iMentor is 11 years old as an organization. I've been for 8 before coming to iMentor as an excellent speaker and working with CEOs. At iMentor, we're trying to do a couple of things, but technology is such a the original idea was technology to create a new kind of mentoring model that could get exponentially more people involved without sacrificing the rigor and the impact of mentoring relationships. And we've largely been really successful at that. And then the question became, if you can get more mentors, how do you make this thing that's traditionally been really highly variable, right? Some people are great mentors and that has great impact, other people are not and it doesn't, and make it more rigorous and reliable and consistent. And we deployed a whole bunch of innovations against that, which include matching algorithms and curriculum and really good use of data and that kind of stuff. And then the idea was, if you could get more mentors and make them effective, where's the most leveraged place to use that? And so we bring this model to schools. Every kid in the school gets a mentor, and what we can do is we can augment guidance and college counseling and ensure more students graduate high school ready for college and get into college. So that's the goal for us. And then we do that in New York City with 2,400 students this year. We'll match them with 2,400 mentors in mentoring relationships that last 3 or 4 years in length. But then our national model is nationwide. Instead of replicating, we partner with other organizations across the country and give them everything they need to run the iMentor model. And so we're doing another 4,000 pairs this year through 20 partnerships across country.
Hi everyone, my name is Oliva, and I'm with an organization called InVenture, and we are a brand new organization we actually just launched last year in 2010. We're a hybrid social enterprise with the mission of providing micro business owners with flexible financial capital, expansion capital, and the guidance and training they need to grow their businesses, create jobs, and ultimately lift themselves and their communities out of poverty. On our for-profit side, what we offer is a flexible revenue sharing product. We work with micro business owners who've graduated past the micro lending but are still not eligible for traditional bank funding. And we work with them, we invest in them, and they repay their investment, their principal, by providing us with a portion of their revenues every month, a percentage of their revenues every month. We crowdsource this funding, so we work with our online platform at www.inventure.org. We work with the public to generate these funds, and we provide them to the entrepreneur directly. We also have a mobile tracking platform that we use to manage these entrepreneurs. They work with us they text us every day with their revenues, their costs, and their profits, and that's how we work with them to kind of train them and guide them throughout their investment term. On our nonprofit side, we work with a fellowship program. We work with university students, graduate students in the US or in the countries where we're working. We're currently working in Mexico, India. We're starting a program in Chile, and we have a program in Mali as well. And we also provide consulting services to NGOs and MFIs on the ground.
Thank you. So, is this on? Can you hear me? Yeah, great, thank you. As you can hear, there's a wealth of experience and perspectives that we have been drawn to this discussion. Let me start by asking sort of one general question for all of the panelists. I'm curious about your opinion about where in the sector you think technology is truly being used most effectively. I'm thinking of examples of, for example, crowdsourcing, mapping, mobile banking, those kinds of applications. Where do you see the greatest early successes? And if you could give an example, that would be very helpful too. Thanks.
All right, I'll take a stab at that. I think that if I try to pull back and think broadly about this, you have seen technology be really effective in solving access problems, right? And so there are examples there, like Donors Choose, who open a new philanthropic market up to new philanthropists and also allow educators to access that capital, right? And that's along the lines of what you do and what Kiva does, and so there's some really exciting innovations there. And then you have some really exciting proof points, I think, in technologies that simply serve sort of point-in-time problems, right? Like you can capture great lectures in Khan Academy, right? And then they're available to everybody forever. And there are lots of great examples of that also. Where I think and then I think there are a bunch of innovations that are harder to see because they're just the smaller ways that organizations are using technology to be more effective and more efficient and to scale. And I think when technology really is starting to have sort of realize its full potential, it'll be embedded throughout the way these organizations operate in the ways that make the most sense.
And we've seen it be very successful in the crowdsourcing space. In our pilot programs, we raised over $15,000 simply through crowdsourcing before we even launched officially, before we even had kind of a public face. And clearly, Kiva's been very successful with the model. And for us, it's a way to connect people to each other. So you're connecting individual people, maybe in the U.S., who are investing small amounts in an entrepreneur in a developing country. And on the entrepreneur side, for us, the mobile platform that we use to track their performance has helped us a lot. And it's a way for the entrepreneurs to kind of work on with technology on their end, and also helps us track their progress.
Well, it's interesting, and I mean, as New Profit, in terms of our investment and our approach, we haven't, as we've started to see a lot more organizations leveraging technology as a core part of their program model, we haven't actually taken any focus specifically on technology or looking for technology-based things. But I'd say that the areas, well, one of the areas we've been very excited about, I mean, we are a large funder of iMentor, and I think the kind of thing that Mike and his organization have done, which isn't necessarily as kind of headline grabbing or as splashy as some of the social networking technologies, but has been incredibly effective at taking something that people have seen as a successful intervention for a long time, mentoring, having a caring adult with a young person in need, and really been able to take that and create a dramatic leap in quality, consistency, much lower cost, and much more scalable. And that's, and we believe that's going to have a huge impact on mentoring, and specifically on college success, which is the area that iMentor is working on. I think we're also seeing a lot of the organizations we work with that you would not classify as technology organizations really starting to leverage technology in some interesting ways. And the one example I'll give is we're significant supporters of KIPP schools, which I think many people are familiar with as the largest nonprofit network of charter schools in the country. And as they have grown from when we first got involved 5 years ago, there were 40 schools across the country, and next fall they'll be at about 130 schools across the country. So dramatic growth. And one of the challenges for them has been as they grow, how do they continue to get better and drive quality up and take advantage of the fact that they have 4 times as many teachers in classrooms as they did 5 years ago, and there should be a lot more opportunity for learning and knowledge generation. And so they've recently invested a lot of energy and effort in a company called Better Lesson that's used for sharing best practices across all of their 120 schools and 1,000 some odd teachers in those schools, so that now instead of a 6th grade math teacher having to figure out for themselves or ask around, what's the best way to start to do introduction to algebra, they can actually look across the entire network and find all sorts of examples and approaches for how to do that. And that's something, again, that is not, I don't know where if I'd classify that as social networking or it's, I guess, a more organized form of crowdsourcing, but it's having a dramatic impact on their ability to drive quality up and keep consistency high, even as their network scales pretty dramatically.
Let me ask then the sort of flip side of the question. Where do you all see some of the challenges and barriers to using technology to make social change happen? Where do you think that there have been, let us say, mismanaged or misplaced expectations? What are some of the danger signs that you've seen? Not, of course, in your own organizations, but in others. Can you start this?
Okay. Well, for us, in terms of barriers, I think because we work internationally and we work generally with underbanked individuals, the adoption has been a difficult thing for us, making sure that our entrepreneurs can adopt the mobile platform, and we work with them very, very diligently to make sure that they understand kind of the models and the process. Even though everyone has a cell phone, it's still kind of new learning tools that we need to instill in the people we work with. In other organizations, I think adoption kind of goes across the board as well. I think I've seen that it depends on the generations, there's generational gaps. There are also kind of that understanding gaps which exist, which I think we need to really work together to make sure that everyone really understands how this can be helpful.
Well, I'd say I'm sure there are a lot of areas that where there have been high hopes that haven't quite been realized. But I know one area that we've been involved with that has not panned out the way we hoped it would, and it's in the whole area of trying to use social networking to create more vibrant communities around specific causes or organizations, and specifically things like causes on Facebook, more recently Jumo, which have tried to leverage social networking platforms to create more energy behind specific organizations. And I think when Sean Parker launched Causes, whatever it was, 4 years ago or so, a lot of high expectations and a lot of excitement around that, and it has had some degree of success, but I think not nearly, hasn't transformed the way that organizations find supporters or mobilize supporters. And similarly with Jumo, which is an organization that New Profit was actually involved in helping to finance. Very, very promising as it looked to be a way to, again, more effectively unite people who had an interest in a particular area or cause and get them information about that. And again, while it has gotten some traction, not nearly as much as was initially hoped, and just recently they've kind of folded their operations in with Good. And so I think that's an area that there's a lot of promise, and it seems like there should be something there, but it doesn't seem like we haven't yet figured out how to leverage the potential there.
Yeah, and I think in the public debate, technology is most misunderstood when it's discussed as an entity unto itself, right? Like, we put technology on this thing, did it work? And it's most powerful when it's solving problems, right? We had this problem in tech, and we used a technology as a tool to get us to be able to solve it. And I think that sort of dynamic is actually pretty pronounced in the education space right now, where we have things like a high-tech high school, where you just pump a lot of technology in and say, did it work or not? And that's more in the debate than in the practice. But one thing I'm interested about, and a dynamic I can see with a huge focus rising on technology and education, on the ed tech space, right? And you have a bunch of nonprofit and for-profit entrepreneurs coming in to build solutions from the tech world, many of them, right? Those entrepreneurs who are inspired first and whose background is in building technology, right? And I'm confident that they will build great tools. Will they bring that same zest and passion to the implementation of those technologies in real-world settings, right? So that technology is not going to work if you don't have really good teacher training, really good ways to integrate it with the school. And for all the new ed tech things that are rising, will they bring the same passion to that aspect of the work as to the first aspect? And I think that's going to be a critical but much less sexy requirement for the stuff being successful.
Right. Then I'm going to ask one other general question of the three of you, then I want to ask each of you a specific question about your own work. I'm curious about what you think is needed for this sector to achieve its promise, to get to some of the kind of scale that we'd all like to see, and in particular, as part of that, how it is that you see the, how it is that you think that this story can be told to philanthropists and other funders to sort of unlock some of the capital that might be theoretically, unless something bad happened recently, might still exist.
Well, let me just clarify. So when you say this sector, Melissa, are you talking about the technology in social innovation, or this?
Yeah, technology for social innovation.
It's an interesting question. And I guess I might ask a question before that, which is I don't know that there is a technology sector in social innovation, or should there be a technology sector? And again, I mean, I think where we have found the most value in these things is where, again, a lot of the same elements that that you would want to have in place for any successful social venture. So, a great, capable leader, great teams, an innovative approach to solving a problem, and committed supporters. That those are the things that matter, and that there are, again, increasingly places where technology can make that story more powerful, where the quality of the program can be enhanced, the cost can be reduced, it can be much more scalable. But in most of those cases, the story per se is not always about the technology, but about again how it enables a more powerful intervention. And I mean, certainly there are things like, Mike mentioned Khan Academy earlier, which has certainly captured the imagination of just about everyone, and I do think has the power to really transform what happens in classrooms. But even that story is while it involves a lot of technology, really was a story that grew out of somebody trying to figure out how do they replicate the tutoring of their nieces and nephews when they're not in the same room and in the same city. It wasn't a particularly advanced technology play, but simply using existing tools to figure out how to bring tutoring to somebody that wasn't in the same room with you.
I want to broaden the first part of the question just a little bit. I think a challenge that the nonprofit sector faces is the amount of real collaboration between nonprofits. Now, I'll use our space, education, youth development space, as an example. We know that for the kids we serve, there's a whole host of supports and interventions that they need to overcome the challenges that they face, right? And so iMentor alone will not do the trick, right? But traditionally in the sector for youth development organizations, when a young person gets enrolled in your program and you see the variety of the needs, right? Organizations try to provide the full spectrum of the supports that those students need. Very rarely do organizations stick to the thing that they were started to do and gain excellence in that thing, and then develop a way to share that out to the field. And what that means is if iMentor got better at mentoring for college success than any other organization in the country, right? We could spend the next 20 years going to 10 cities, maybe spend $20 million and serve 500 kids in each city, and not really begin to touch the enormity of the need, right? So what we're trying to do instead is, instead of a bricks and mortar replication model, if we have figured out this mentoring model that's really powerful, can we use a combination of technology and curriculum and consulting to actually partner with other organizations, allow them to run the model, and create something that's much more scalable and much more collaborative? And I think technology can play a huge role in that kind of partnership and collaboration among nonprofits. As for recommendations for funders, which is always fun to do, current funders excluded, of course, I think that and this is more of the institutional funders, and I think the funding community is already moving in this direction, but the more that you fund outcomes and not inputs, right? The more that nonprofits then have the space that they need to go out and develop and get the tools that they need to get the outcomes that they promised, right? And so rather than a funder coming in and saying, you need to use technology to have this impact, I think a funder giving nonprofits the space to to develop the tools they need through more general operating support is a huge step there.
And just to echo what's been said a little bit, what I really believe is that there needs to be a balance between program and mission and technology. I think when we entered the space, we didn't actually think of ourselves as a technology organization per se, and that's something that we had to learn how to develop on our own. And it's something that we had to find that balance. And that was something that we struggled with. And I think that that's true of many new organizations that are kind of starting up in this arena. Some may start off as a technology organization, and the mission may not be as clear, and vice versa. So I think that having that balance is really important.
So let me now turn and ask each of you a more specific question about your own sort of work and experience. Doug, I'd really love to hear you say a little bit about your experience as a funder of Single Stop, because that's an interesting model for us here.
Great. Great. The organization that Melissa's referring to is called Single Stop USA. They're actually based here in New York, actually not too far from where we're sitting right now. And I think they're an organization that is making really powerful use of technology, but probably wouldn't describe themselves as a technology organization. And what they are focused on is how to help community college students actually stay in school and finish degrees. And I won't go through all the statistics around dropout rates at community colleges, but they're enormous. Completion rates are very, very low, and there is an opportunity there because community colleges serve a lot of low-income populations and could be a real gateway to future success if we could figure out how to make them more effective. And one of the barriers has been non-academic financial issues that are faced by a lot of the students there. And so what Single Stop has realized is that there doesn't necessarily need to be new government programs created to help solve that problem. There are already many, many programs that would be effective. It's just that they're so complicated and difficult to figure out how to access that many people don't get access to them, especially some of the younger students at community colleges. And so what they have done is leverage technology and essentially create, for those of you, I don't know how many in this room have already been filing taxes, but have created a very simple sort of TurboTax-like program that will walk someone through a questionnaire that will determine whether or not they're eligible for a whole variety of benefits and financial supports at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level, and take a process that could take an individual, maybe several weeks of frustrating searching around, trying to figure out if they're eligible, applying, getting denied because they didn't put the right form in, into like a 15-minute interview. And in general, they're able through that to essentially direct critical financial support to students right at the point where it has a real impact on whether or not they're able to stay in school, which then will have an impact on whether they graduate, and we believe will have long-term impact on their future success. So it's again, it's kind of behind the scenes, but a very powerful use of technology to unlock some real benefits and we think create some real impact in a critical area.
Mike, I wanted to ask you to say a little bit more about how exactly you're using technology at iMentor and how you see that as part of a social change strategy.
Sure. So I'll talk about some of the challenges and problems that we face that we've been able to manage well through technology. The original one when iMentor started was mentoring's been around for 100 years. It's a really well-researched, well-proven intervention for young people, but if you want to be a mentor, you have to go to where the student lives every Tuesday at 4, right? Which ruled out almost everybody who, our theory was, had the time to give and the desire to give, but didn't have that flexibility in their schedule. So we turned that once-a-week in-person model into one curriculum-structured email a week and one in-person meeting a month. right? All of a sudden, you could be a great mentor at midnight in your pajamas after putting your kids to bed. And that exponentially unlocked this whole new class of mentors. And we, even though we're serving 2,400 kids this year, even though you have to sign up for a 3 or 4 year commitment, we have a waiting list of mentors this year. And so what we've seen is there's a huge demand for that kind of thing. So that's the first problem. The second problem was it was easy when we were 100 kids to create great matches between mentors and mentees. But when you serve thousands of kids every year, how do you do that at scale and efficiently? So what's out there that's making great matches effectively? Online dating. So we were able to take some of the algorithms and study and learn from the algorithms that the online dating sites were using, which, by the way, we're employing the best researchers in the country to come up with those algorithms, and find a really scalable way to match mentors and mentees based on what the mentee wanted in a mentor, which is the most research validated. That's the best predictor of a strong match. So then you turn to the next set of problems, which is we know that if you just put a mentor-mentee together and say do the program, it's not going to work. You need a youth development specialist who's in charge of the success of the relationship. But how do you do that in a really scalable way? If they're in charge of 100 pairs, which they are in our program, how do they know which pairs need their support? And so we have tools to screen every email in the system, to find out who's participating, to find out who's on track and not, to track their progress over the course of the relationship. Basically all the ways that you can track case management in all these other sectors, we've pulled them in to do really good case management for the people we serve. And then I sort of mentioned the last one, which is if you can develop a good thing in one city, how is there a more scalable and effective way to share that nationally? And instead of a bricks and mortar replication, we've developed this platform called the iMentor Interactive, which gives other nonprofits and school systems all over the country everything they need to run the program in our model. And we wrap that with some additional support, but we can serve thousands of more pairs every year, and eventually without requiring any philanthropic dollars.
Great, thank you. Well, Ani, could you talk a little bit about the work that you've done using technology in the microfinance sector?
So the two kind of main components of our technology is the online platform that we've built to do the crowdsourcing. So the way our website works is a user goes online, can invest a minimum of $25 in one of our entrepreneurs. We put together profiles of our entrepreneurs. We actually have a very kind of strict due diligence process. So on our website, you'll see our entrepreneur's business, a description of their business, a description of who they want to, what kinds of reinvestments they want to make. You'll see some information about what successes their business has had and what their investment is going to be for. Then the investments get collected. We take 90%. We take those investments. We put them in the entrepreneurs' accounts. 90% of that is crowdsourced. 10% comes from us. And then we have what we call the seed, the social enterprise expansion dollars. You'll see how those collect on our website. And basically what those are, the profits that are generated from the investment, the user isn't able to take it out. The principal can be taken out. The user can't take those seeds out, but they can direct them to either another entrepreneur or a donation of some sort. So we've built this very extensive platform, and we've tried to figure out ways to have users understand who our entrepreneurs are, what their stories are, and those kinds of things. And then on the flip side of that, we have the mobile platform. We work with the entrepreneurs on the ground to make sure we get all of those metrics. In addition to all of that, just the communications piece is completely just reliant on technology. I speak to one of our entrepreneurs every week through via Skype or other resources such as those. So it really is kind of the backbone of what we do at the end of the day, because all of the communication, all of the getting in touch with the entrepreneurs, working with our investors, and our user investors as well, all of that is done via the internet.
Thank you. Okay, let's, I think it's your turn now, so if you want to start heading over toward the microphones, that would be very helpful. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. My name is Shanice Rose. I'm Oliva. I'm second year. My first question is for iMentor, and I just want to know, when you look at the concept of mentoring, what characteristics did it have that you said to yourself, hey, I could put this on the internet and make it scalable? Can you do that with another concept like how to be a good boss, or even something more personal like how to be a good husband? So if you can tell us how to transfer that knowledge. And then also for InVenture, the hardest thing for people sitting in the US or in New York is to identify with the crisis that's happening in another part of the world, like in Calcutta, India, where I'm from, unless it's something catastrophic, right, like an earthquake. So how do you get people to write a check? How do you get people to enter in their credit card number and to support someone they've never met and has to really have a good faith that they can actually do something with their money? How do you inspire that? Thank you.
Are you married?
I'm not.
So I think the answer is yes and no, and I think the answer involves technology and it doesn't, right? And so the part that involved technology was we could open it up to more people by adding flexibility into the experience, right? You didn't have to go every Tuesday. You could send these emails. But if it was online only, it wouldn't work. If mentors and mentees didn't get together every single month, it wouldn't work because you can't build the depth of the personal relationship and the candor you need without that. And so I think, you know, we have to manage our expectations, and organizations actually have to find that sweet spot between old, tried and true and the efficiencies that technology can create. But the other piece that's not technology that maybe could map to be a better husband or could is there's great research out there about these things that are really hard to measure, right? What are the skills and competencies? What are the social, emotional competencies that kids need to be successful? And you can actually create a curriculum that provides a baseline of conversations and experiences that every mentor-mentee pair goes through. That's what we have done. And the power of our model ultimately is the combination of both that baseline and the fact that it's still one person working with one young person, and that relationship can be idiosyncratic to the needs of that individual person. So I would say the combination of technology and in-person, and then the combination of a baseline that's research-informed and a piece that's unscripted is a model that can absolutely map to a bunch of other things.
I think the last part of your question was how do we inspire people to participate in our work, and it's about, you know, telling a story. I think that there are a lot of people out there who want to help. Doesn't necessarily have to be a catastrophic event, but I think people want to help, but we have to make it easy for them. Some of the feedback that I've gotten, we have a pretty complicated, complex model, and I'm very connected to this work on a very personal level. For me, the entrepreneurs we work with are not just kind of numbers on a board. They are my family, they're my grandmother, they're my cousin, they're my aunt. And so I understand their story really well. So how do we translate that? How do I translate that story and put it on a website so people want to invest in this individual? And that's something that I've had to learn to do. I've actually had to learn how to tell less of the story and give people the information they need to hear, but also compel them to be a part of it, and it's worked somewhat. And I think, you know, using things like social media, Twitter, Facebook have been really helpful, going out and speaking, and actually showing, you know, pictures of who our entrepreneurs are. They have stories, they have, you know, and not just that, but we're empowering them to give back to their own community. So the things that they're doing is really remarkable, and it's showing someone that, you know, $25 going to an entrepreneur can turn into that entrepreneur, then creating a job in their community, and also sending a child in their village to school. That little goes a long, long way, and I think that people really connect to that message.
Thank you.
I just want to follow on that, because I talked earlier about some of the things that haven't been successful, and this notion of trying to create kind of general communities around causes or organizations. What I didn't mention is the piece that has been very successful have been things, Mike mentioned Donors Choose, other things like Global Giving, Kiva, and I think that the key has been and it sounds like what InVenture is doing as well, is it's very difficult to get, or it's more difficult to get donors excited about you know, being a small part of this large amorphous thing. And what a lot of these sites have done is break down the need into very, very concrete, easy to understand chunks. So Donors Choose asks people to fund specific projects in a specific classroom that will take a very, you know, $600 will enable them to do a module on ecology in this particular classroom, in this particular school. And similarly with global giving, very specific projects in a specific country for a specific amount of money. And I think that level of granularity creates a much stronger connection between a person really feeling like, okay, my $25, it's actually a meaningful part of a $1,500 project, and so I'm much more likely to give that. And I think overall, I mean, I'm not a development expert, but studies have shown for a long period of time that that donors are much more likely to give to very specific things, even if you could step back rationally and if you made a rational case that their money, your $500 can help an entire country do this, they'd be much more likely to give to something that said your $500 is going to help this child get dental examinations and have this result. So I think that the technologies that the organizations that have used technology to be able to on a large scale create to match at a very micro level donors to specific projects have been very successful, and I think we'll see a lot more of that.
Another question? Sure, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Daniel. I'm an undergraduate at Princeton, and my question is for Melissa and Doug. I'm wondering what advice you have for individual donors. My perspective is that I want to make the biggest impact possible out of my donor money. And I'm drawn to these social business type models, and especially the ones that are pioneering these new technologies, because of the advantages that they have in scalability and sustainability. But I've also found in my personal experience that it's harder to find evidence of cost effectiveness for a lot of these types of ventures because they're so much newer than traditional approaches and traditional charities. So I'm wondering what advice you have for individual donors. How should we think about giving to these types of organizations, and if there are any resources out there that we should be aware of?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that. I think one of the things that we frequently advise donors is to have a kind of clear understanding of not only what issue they want to support and what change they want to see, but what's motivating them and how they think change happens and how they want to be involved and how they want to assess progress. There are, and we try, and with all due respect to the fact that we're in a business school, and that the metaphor of philanthropy as investing is a very powerful metaphor that has a lot to offer. For a good deal of philanthropy, the appropriate metaphor is really a research experiment. And if you are funding in an area where there's where there's a long history of data and common standards and common ways of reporting outcomes, as there is in the investing world in many places, then you can use that model. If you're in a part of the philanthropic sector where that doesn't exist, what you have to look at is what you would look at if you were funding a research experiment. Does the organization have the capacity to carry out this experiment? Does it have a rational research design? Will the research design and the experiment result in answers that can be useful, whether it succeeds or whether it fails? There are also donors who don't actually have who don't actually like that kind of thing. They don't want to be funding an experiment. They want to be funding a proven solution. And so that's part of what we ask about in terms of motivations. You need to make that choice internally and then be ready to take on different levels of risk depending on what kind of model of funding you're using, whether you're an investor or an experimenter.
I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I think that's absolutely true and great. I love that metaphor. I mean, we use the investing metaphor all the time, but I think the research experiment is a very apt metaphor. I mean, even in areas where there's long-standing data, there are proving things in this field is very, very difficult, and so there are very few things that are proven.
I guess the other thing I'd say for donor, I mean, these days, given it is much easier today than it was 10 years ago to get lots of information about what's happening with any particular organization or intervention. And so, well, whether it's through, as we talked about, some of the sites that give very detailed information about individual projects, so you can get very specific in your funding. But even on any given organization, there's lots, there's so much information online about every organization. So there are opportunities to find out a lot more without having to go, 10 years ago you'd have to go do a site visit and talk to lots of people. You can find out a tremendous amount online these days about anything that you're giving to. But I'd say first and foremost is the advice that Melissa said in terms of really understanding sort of what it is that you care about and that you're trying to achieve, and then just being thoughtful about finding organizations that seem to be doing that, and then continuing to follow up on that and not just forgetting it and continuing to give regardless of what's happening with the organization.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more question. Maybe two, so you don't have to, we don't want to have a fight break out. I've been told that there's no violence in this session, so.
I think mine may be short and sweet. I'm here representing a small mom and pop social venture, been around 10 years, and they really haven't leveraged technology, and very successful in their own way in achieving goals. Haven't leveraged technology, haven't sought investors, and I came here just to find out what would be a good first step for them. Where would they begin? And I just wondered if you had any ideas, suggestions.
What would you like to start?
The suggestion would be just to look at the biggest problems that they're facing and see, are there existing technology tools that would help them do that easier, quicker, more cost effectively. And if not, then not. I mean, not everything needs technology, and technology is certainly not an answer for everything, but I think that's ultimately the question.
Okay, one more question.
Hello, my name is Hussein Jawlon. I'm from African Solution. My name is Hussein Jawlon. I'm from African Solution. My question is, how you generate the money to sustain your businesses? The most challenges the startup is getting the first clients, getting the investment, and actually generating money to sustain the business. I'm not trying to steal your business model, but I'm interested on your pricing model. Yeah, how you get the money to run the business.
Okay. Bonnie, you want to?
So since we are a hybrid structure, we actually do have two different financing models, but we do generate revenue on each side. On the for-profit, we do generate some of the profits from the entrepreneurs, but also we go after angel investors. That's kind of our main source of funding on that side, and we take part in a number of business plan competitions and other things like that. So we recently just won the Echo and Green Fellowship in Social Entrepreneurship, and my partner Shivani was just in the Unreasonable Institute for 6 weeks, where she met with a number of different investors. And so that's the kind of track that we are on that side. And on the InVenture Foundation side, the nonprofit, we're looking at getting grant funding, looking at a number of different foundations, going out and speaking with people, and really it's about meeting organizations who can provide you with that funding, and also we provide consulting services, so we have a revenue stream on that arm as well.
And you should feel free to steal our economic model if you want, but we started in New York City as a direct service program that was funded by grants and by a variety of grants from individuals and corporations and foundations and smaller grants. And as we've scaled that up, we are both looking at what are the sort of funding streams in traditional philanthropy that are most well aligned with our program, that strengthen our program while they fund the program, and concentrating on those, and so getting over time less and less diverse and more deep in a couple of things that we can be great at. And then, like Bonnie, our national model is an earned income model. People, nonprofits and schools pay us to use this model, and we've got about 4 more years, we think, until it can break even. And if so, then it can serve thousands of students every year without requiring any philanthropic capital. So we will both look to get more efficient in our direct service program, but that'll always have some aspect of traditional philanthropy. But then we're really excited about trying to build a national model that doesn't need it. And I think it's cool to have both of us up here who are doing that, because it's actually not being done by a ton of organizations in the sector right now, but I think and hope that you'll see it more and more.
So if I can just wrap up quickly, we're clearly just at the threshold of understanding how new technologies can have a dramatic impact in bringing about the change that many of us want to see in the world. We've talked a fair amount at this particular panel, both about the education and youth development sectors, as well as about enterprise, but clearly, as we all know, there are fascinating applications that have to do with human rights, movement building, democracy building, civic institutions, et cetera, which we barely understand. I think if I were to pull together the one lesson that we've heard from all of our speakers in different ways is that it kind of reminds me of the period some years ago in the corporate sector where every corporation was implementing enterprise-wide software. And the organization I used to work with did a research study on how that implementation was going. And the general conclusion from the chief technology officer was that the software was flawless, but the people were really the problem. And I think clearly we've heard example after example where the technology is the enabler, and this is all part of a human context, and we have to have those things going hand in hand. So with that, I thank you all for your attention and participation, and hope you enjoyed this session.